Morning guys, and welcome to this week's vlog. I find myself at a place called St Mary's Lighthouse at Whitley Bay, which is on the northeast coast of England. And what a fantastic looking place this is. I've never been here before. It's just delightful. It's not my first choice for today, it's my second choice, but my first choice was in a place called Seaham. I went to photograph the famous Seaham Wheels. I believe that's how the place is pronounced, by the way. It reads Seaham if you wanted to look it up. And if you want to know what I'm talking about, look up Seaham Wheels or Seaham Wheels. They're famous wheels that are submerged, slightly submerged in the sea. Anyway, just look it up, you'll see for yourself. I went there a week ago. It's 5 o'clock in the morning and this doesn't look good at all. And if anything could go wrong on a shoot, it did that day. The weather was bad, it was foggy as hell, the light was terrible, the visibility obviously because of the fog, the sea fret was there, so water was all over the lenses, I couldn't grab any shots. Worse than that, walking down to the actual beach, I fell over and face planted, so it wasn't the best of days. So not to be outdone by that, I came back again this morning, a week later, and a pretty similar thing happened, apart from I didn't fall over and face plant. The weather was bad and the same sea fret, the same fog was in the air. It was just awful, but not to be outdone. I obviously then decided to come here and shoot this place instead. It's freezing cold. It's 10 degrees in the car. It's June. It's freezing cold. About 30 minutes now before the tide is fully in, and I've scouted out some locations. I've probably got about 3 in mind I'm going to take, because there's a lot of interest in the foreground here. Obviously the background is always going to be the lighthouse in this particular shot, but there's a lot of interest here. It's really quite cool. But all the shots that I've got in mind will entail a long shutter speed. Now the only problem is with shooting with a long shutter speed today, I'm not sure if you can hear it on my microphone, but it's blowing a gale and freezing cold. It's absolutely freezing. So of course, long shutter speed, wind blowing, it might cause me some issues, especially because there's a particular shot I want to do. I want to go quite a distance back with my long lens, zoom right in, compress that lighthouse right down, and make it probably the only thing that's actually in the frame. And I think that will be a very nice composition. But long lens from a distance over a long shutter speed, and of course in this wind, might be very problematic indeed. But you know, we can't moan about it. We just got to man up and get on with it. Well, the tide is in and I'm pretty much all coffeeed out, so I'm buzzing right now, and I've got an hour. That's how much time I've put on my car, so let's crack on. First shot, very straightforward. I'm simply using the path as a leading line. The path might be a little bit wishy-washy because the sea is actually coming up and just spreading itself as far up as where my tripod currently sat, and so it might get a little kind of glossed over a bit, but I don't mind that because we've got some leading lines to the left, leading lines to the right, and it's very simple. My setup at the moment, I'm at f11, I'm at ISO 50, and I'm at 1 minute exposure, and that's the reason why I've opted for the ISO 50. I might opt for a 2 minute exposure by taking the aperture to f16. So if you think about that for a second, I'm actually closing the hole from f11 to f16 by 1 stop, and in which case, to compensate, you'll then have to double the shutter speed, hence the reason we can then go from a 1 minute to a 2 minute exposure, and I might try that as well. That looks a very nice shot, actually. I'm quite happy with that. I focus stack this image. Now let me give you a bit of a tip when it comes to focus stacking. And this is how I tend to focus stack my images. First of all, before I take any shots, I'm just watching these waves because they're actually lashing up now around my feet and around the tripod legs. Without physically taking the shot, I've actually focused on the background, which is obviously in this instance the lighthouse, but I didn't take the shot. But once I focused on it, I've simply looked at the top of the lens and looked at the settings, looked at the distance that the camera has actually focused, but I haven't actually taken the picture. Then I focus 6 feet in front of the lens, and then when I focus 6 feet in front of the lens, I then switch my camera focus system to manual. And when I switch my camera focus system to manual, I then take the first shot without touching my focus system. In other words, I'm going to leave it on manual. I then look at the window of my lens and adjust it manually to where I remembered the focus point to be on the lighthouse, and then simply take another shot. And that way you're not expecting the camera's focus system to start hunting. Otherwise sometimes you can end up with a slightly different composition. It's slightly moved, and it's just my way of doing it, but it just works and I do it every time. One of the other things I like to do as well on a long exposure shot is take a separate shot of the sky. So increase your shutter speed and then make sure I freeze the clouds in the sky. I'm not a keen lover of streaky clouds, although sometimes they work, especially in black and white. Sometimes they work, but I don't always do it. But again, it's something that I do quite often. On a long exposure shot, I like the sea to be nice and flat, but I like the detail back in the sky. So I'll take a second shot and then I'll simply in post-production put those two shots together. I don't think we need to worry about that today though. There's just no detail in that sky whatsoever. Definitely my favourite composition so far, using these poles as foreground interest to the left hand side, the lighthouse on the right hand side. It's just such a shame that the light is just so bad. If this had a nice sky with some details in the clouds and that red golden light that you'd expect from a sunrise, this would be absolutely a shot to dream for. So I'm definitely going to come back to this. Also, it's high tide, but I thought the sea would have covered these poles a bit more than they actually have. They look very weathered and very storm damaged, so I'm guessing at some point the sea does come a lot higher than it actually is today. So really on a high tide, it's going to be worthwhile coming back to that as well. But what I'm now going to try and do is go much further back along the coastline there, get my long lens in. If I get a low enough perspective, it might give the impression that these poles that are jutting out are actually under the sea or submerged within the sea, and that should be quite interesting. Walking further along the coastline, I've just happened to notice these very flat rocks, and they're all zigzaggedy and they're just delightful. So I'm using these as foreground interest at the moment, off into the lighthouse into the background, and I think these will make for a very nice picture indeed. 11, shoot over and done with, and it's only 12 degrees outside, actually freezing cold, very wet, but no, I've really enjoyed that shoot. Now that shoot obviously wasn't the shoot that I imagined I'd be shooting this morning when I set my alarm last night for 10 to 3 this morning, when I left my house at 3 o'clock this morning, but Seaham was just never going to happen. That's twice in 1 week, so I'm a little bit disappointed about that, but of course the good thing about that is I've got it to do again, so I don't mind coming back up here. But this place here, this lighthouse, fantastic. I think I'd prefer it if the tide was slightly higher. So if I came at a time of the year when the tide was higher, then I think I'd benefit more from the shoot. But more importantly, if I had half decent light, if I had a decent sky, or even a sunrise. But never mind, you can have it always. And of course, the way I look at it is, if I get some half decent shots under poor lighting conditions, then can imagine what they would be like under better lighting conditions, and that's the way you got to look at it. Well, that's it. Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed it, you know what to do. I'll catch you on the next one. Bye bye.